Hey folks, I'm going to do a quick review of the gallery I shot last night. This was Becky G at the House of Blues here. Same venue as my last video, but a completely different show. Um, I recorded my entire editing session, but then when I played it back, I had recorded audio from both my microphone and AirPods, so it sounded doubled and echoey, sounded terrible. So I'm just going to go through my selects, my final gallery here, and touch on some of the editing I did, and a couple of quick ones for the opener here. This is her DJ, part of the band when she performs. But also, I think he said that's he's her cousin as well. So the stage setup was really interesting for the House of Blues. You can see in this shot they had this 3-tier platform with this room of like glass walls and light panels that slid in and out. Is a really elaborate, really big production for the stage size. So for his opening set, they had him in this really confined, curtained off space here. So the angle to get shots of him was a very, very extreme, very hard to get. This is probably the best shot I got of him, and I'll show you with the raw file. This was the angle, and then corrected, I went in and did a transform vertical here to fix that or correct it to look more straight on, and I think it turned out really well. So there's the edit and there's the original. That's a fine shot, but I think it looks a lot better with the perspective corrected. Anything else from his I want to show? For this crowd shot, you can see I really pushed the shutter speed down to 30th of a second and ISO 6400. There's all these colored lights going around, but I really wanted to get a nice wide crowd shot, and I'll show you what some of the other ones look like and the reason I dropped it down to that low. Some of the crowd shots I was trying to get before I dropped the shutter speed just were not turning out. Here we go. So you can see how much darker all of these shots were. These are at 200th of a second. So shooting in shutter priority, I just kept dropping it down 100th, 30th, and then I got a shot with really good, plenty of light there. And this is on the 24-70 2.8 IS, so you can shoot at 30th of a second. It's going to be sharp. You'll get motion blur if someone's moving a lot, of course, but the crowd was mostly static for a DJ set. Nothing crazy. Stat-wise, for the show, I shot about 1,500 shots and about half and half on the R6, R7. I always use a crop sensor, full frame sensor combo like that, because then when I use prime lenses especially, or even zooms, I get more reach if I put on the R7, because you get that 1.6 crop factor. So your equivalent view on a 200 millimeter at the end of 70 to 200 becomes like 320. So that's just nice in concerts where you're shooting from back of house or soundboard, stuff like that, which I did a lot for this show. Lenses, I took the 50 prime. I knew I would use that the most, or I would prefer that one the most when it was the right choice, because she's a soloist, and I was correct in my selects. Ended up being mostly from the 50 1.2. I took the 24-70 because that's just good coverage for some wide shots. I did get some wide shots, especially the crowd there I showed. And then the 300 2.8 to get some tight shots from the back of the crowd from the soundboard. I was actually behind the soundboard and still got really tight shots. And let's see, go back to my selects here, and we'll start with hers. This is a prism shot. I'll show you the before and after. So like I said, that stage had a lot of really elaborate light panels in this. Here's a good one. This room she started the show in, it's got these closed doors. All of these surfaces were lit with these light panels on the edges and stuff, and that was all around the stage. So it was really tough lighting for a lot of the show. Ended up editing color for this golden brown, mostly for the skin color, because the bright red, once edited, didn't look as good. I'll show you what the as shot white balance and color corrected, or non-color corrected. So you can see all that just without the corrections. I don't think was going to come together without changing the hue of the red channel, which is where most of my color corrections came in here. along with white balance, of course. But bringing this up towards the yellow side makes for the warmer skin tones, the golden brown that matches true color better. The prism shot, I took the glass prism, it's a 6-inch triangular prism, and I got these really fun reflections. I'll show you a couple more I did with it to show you the effect. This one, same shot. I actually like her pose and the dancer's pose a little more in this one, but there was a little too much of the lens flare from the prism. So this one ended up being the one I kept. I also like the reflection down here. It looks more like a double exposure, mirroring the top rafters and beams on the bottom. And that's not in the second one. It's just these horizontal lines from the risers on the stage. So that's the prism shot I kept, and that's one of my favorites. I really like that. For my selects, I mentioned I used mostly the 51.2. I had 21 from that, 18 from the 24-70, and 13 from the 300, but that's including the opener. Let's see for hers, 15, 12, and 10. Yeah, so the 50 did end up being the most used, or gave me the most shots that I liked and kept. I also shot more on the 300 than the others, just purely because when shooting on the adapted EF lens, especially the telephotos like that, it does tend to hunt focus more in tough lighting like a concert. So I'll shoot burst mode more often, or I'll hold it down in burst mode more often than I will on the other lenses, because I know they're going to be more accurate with the focus. The 300 is still great though. I still get shots I couldn't get otherwise with it, and love when it's in focus and it's sharp. It's great. Some more shots. These are just sharp, clean, good light. I waited a lot for the light to be complementary and not be just a hard red cast like so much of the set was. You can see like a lot of the set was like this, but then there would be moments where she would come out into, so here we go. So this would be a lot of the set when she was in that room, especially the lights just hard red cast, but then she would walk out into the spotlight and then you have great light to work with. So most of my edits and selects came from when there was a spotlight on her that made for a good light. The spotlight, I had some issues with it, both in color temperature and when she was on top of the stage, on top of the risers. The spotlight, I don't think it could angle high enough to get where it should be on her. And so you'll see a couple shots where you can tell the spotlight's not quite centered. It's more on her torso than her face, and that kind of hurts the exposure. These are a couple of really good shots in the room that I had to go black and white because they were just not only red cast, but just completely hazed over. And the only saving grace for that is to just go black and white. But it looks really nice. This one was the one that I did try to save. You could tell it's not as hazy. It's just mostly red cast. And I tried to make it match that golden amber color the rest of the photos. I think it's a good frame. Here's another one where you can see the rest of the set still that harsh red, but the spotlight on her makes it a really good frame. This is the 51.2. You can see the separation you get. If this was on the 72 or the 24-70 at 50 millimeters for the same exact composition, it wouldn't probably be one I would keep because the keyboardist back here would be more, or he's actually the bassist and keyboardist, he would be more in focus and it would be distracting. But with the 51.2, it's at 1.4 here, blurred out the background enough to keep her separated and make it a usable frame. These are some of my favorites. This sequence here, had a really hard time trying to narrow it down, ended up keeping this one and this one. But the middle one's great too. That's a really strong pose. Her eye catching the spotlight. But I really liked this pose a little more. And then this one is just a great, like, kind of iconic pop star moment. I love that one. These next two are some of my favorites as well. This one I put into 2:4:1 aspect ratio, 2:2:1, 2.2 by 1, which is a common aspect ratio in movies. And I thought that looked really nice. And then the next one, it's almost the same shot. You can tell her pose is slightly different. You can see her hips are a little more turned. This one I put into 4:5 vertical. And I think they both work really well. They're just different uses. This one would look really nice on a web page. this one will look really good on social media because 4:5 is like the largest aspect ratio that Instagram will use natively. So if you want your images to look as big as possible on phone screens in Instagram, put them in 4:5, either vertical or horizontal. That will take up the most screen space in an Instagram feed. So I use that a lot. Here's another 4:5. This one is, I had to push this one a lot. You can see it's almost completely washed out. There's not much data there. So I had to go black and white and really push some of the sliders here. And a tip, when you're working in black and white like this, your white balance and your color channels can do interesting things to your exposure. So that's moving the tint. This is moving the temperature, and it's completely affecting the exposure, shadows, highlights, everything. Also down in the calibration panel. And it's similar effect to putting film filters on black and white film. You can block out the red, green, blue channels, or yellow, orange, and stuff like that on film, and it'll have that effect on your black and white exposures. Even though you're shooting black and white, you're blocking out the channels of color, those specific ranges of color in light itself. So editing in black and white, you can get similar effects playing with the color channels even though you're in black and white. And let's revert that. Started messing with it and didn't undo. So here we are. Oh, we got pretty close back, but this one had a little more punch. Here's another one, same exact thing, really washed out shot, but it was a great pose. I really like that one. Here's a good one that I had to go a lot softer than earlier edits, so I'll copy and paste like this one to this one. If we copy and paste the settings, you'll see how much sharper and how much harsher the light was. I think the spotlight was turned up for this part of the set, so it's like really gritty, hard on our skin tones. So I went with the softer golden color, even though my white balance is very, very cool side. The default was orange. Same with the color mixer. Again, I boosted that hue channel up a lot, and then calibration brought out some of that pink back to the yellow as well. There's a lot of green in the spotlight, which you can kind of see in the before here on our skin tones. So the mix of red and green light was kind of hard to work with and took a little more work than normal at this venue. And then these were just the same settings. Love that pose. Here's one I had to throw into Denoise. And let's see if we can find the original. So here's the original. You can see how grainy it is at 6400 and the original color. But then throwing it into Denoise made a huge difference in the image quality. Still a noisy, grainy image, but it looks great. That's definitely a usable image. This one was not much work needed. You can see, again, the green on her skin from the spotlight mixed with that harsh red light. But editing-wise, it didn't take nearly as much on this one. Color grading, which brought out some warmth, tried to balance out how much green it was adding. But you can't really go into the tint slider because it's going to turn everything purple since there's so much red. And you can see that data-wise here, the histogram in a lot of these shots, the red is going to be a lot stronger across their frame. Up here in the histogram, you can see just how much red there is. Another great shot on the 51.2. So there's a good example of the 24 versus the 24 to 70 versus 51.2. So 24 to 70 for the shot. You could see the whole staircase is basically sharp, even though it's at 2.8. She's obviously the standout part because of the lighting, but the rest of the frame is more in focus than you would typically want. It works fine, but compare that to this next frame and the one step up starts to blur, and 2 steps up where her head is completely out of focus. So it really isolates the subject more, and it also affects that light more. You get a nice softer glow and this really nice light beam cutting through her hair and everything. And another one on the 51.2 for this one. So I think if these were shot on the 24-70, these wouldn't have been usable because the background would have been so sharp, so much more in focus with a larger focal plane at 2.8. Here's one of her on the top of the stage, and this is at 300. I should have shot probably 400th of a second, or maybe pushed to 500th of a second. And here's another one. Here's one where you can see the spotlight effect I was talking about. I'll show you the before. So the spotlight comes up to about her chin, and you can see from the circle there, it doesn't actually get up to where her head, the top of her head, and you can see the center of it is kind of around her torso. And I think that's because this platform was so high that the spotlight physically couldn't move up anymore. You could kind of see it cut off when it was being operated. So what I did to adjust for that was I put in an adjustment mask, a gradient here, and all it does is boost the exposure a little, and I brought it down to about chin level. And it's a gradient to make it not as harsh. You could do it like this, but the more you pull it down, the softer the effect will fade out. But I love that shot. It's a good pose. The golden light is a creative choice because it's obviously not, it doesn't match what the actual lighting looks like with the red, but I think it makes for a really nice aesthetic. Here's another 300-2.8. Just a really good pose. I love the background dancer. The background's a little cluttered. This would be a stronger shot if it had a clean background like this. But I think it's a good enough shot. It was worth keeping. Here's a good example. There's the same idea, but no distracting background. Here's a wide shot of the stage. Just a good moment. The light on her, the spotlight making her stand out while everyone else is in the color wash. It's a really nice effect. And not too many phones other than that one right there in front of her that stands out. A couple more 300. I really like this one. The backup dancers are a little distracting in this one, but it's such a good pose and expression from her that it's definitely one to keep. Here's another. This one I did shoot at 400th of a second. It's still a little soft, and that's just kind of an issue with the 300 adapted on the RF. It does hunt for focus and misses a little bit, but it's a sharp enough image that it's worth using, and it's a great pose, a great expression. And I did boost up the clarity and texture a lot, so I could drop it down. You can see how much softer it is, but boosting it up makes it stand out and pop. Could even bring up the actual sharpness a little more. Put some masking somewhere around there. Yeah, it's a subtle effect, but when you export, it would export sharpening. It'll be nice. This was a really nice pose. I love this moment. She's got the hat on. She's singing. The light was terrible. It's the dreaded purple-blue cast, which is almost worse than the red. So what I did to color correct this one, fully warmed up the temperature, dropped the tint. You can see how much of that affects it, getting the skin tones back towards normal. And my goal when I'm color correcting something like this is to not make it look like it didn't have like the blue of the scene. It's still got the coolness of the scene, but the skin tones look back closer toward normal. You could still tell that was a very cool production design moment. Like I'm not making it look like it was warm or anything, and that's kind of my goal. Color grading, I did some work here to really warm up the image and the skin, and then calibration is the last bit there. And sometimes it's counterintuitive. Like the original image has a lot of purple and red, but I'm still moving the shadow slider towards that side just because going towards the green side makes it more blue. And some of it's a counterbalance, like you're putting red in here and then pushing things in color mixer. Oh, not in this one. I didn't use color mixer at all. In color grading, in custom, you're going green here and then red here in the shadows, that kind of thing. It's kind of a trial and error thing, and it's not something you can necessarily copy and paste to, like anytime you have blue lighting, try this. But it can get you a good starting point. And once you understand how to use the sliders, you can find the right mix of things, the right elements to color correct. But I think this looks really good. Like if you showed someone this image, they wouldn't necessarily think the starting point was this purple blue haze. This is another one. Similar work on this one. And you can see the only saving grace of this one is that the spotlight's on her, which makes her warm, because the rest of the stage is that really strong, unusable color cast. If you wanted to correct it, at least. You can keep the really stylized look like the rest of the stage has here. But I really wanted to get the colors right on her because of the flag wrapped around her. It was a really nice moment. Someone in the crowd had the Mexican flag, and she grabbed it from him and wrapped it around her and sang this whole song with it. I love this one. This one I cropped in. Let's see. Yeah, I cropped in a decent amount. And then I also did a little bit of perspective correct on that. Well, the vertical, I think. Yeah, the vertical 15, negative 16. Just kind of straightens out. I was shooting from so far below, and the next one you can tell. Yeah, I'm down here, and she's 20 feet up or so. This was another moment I liked a lot. Good pose from her. And then this is a good moment with, she brought some kids on stage to sing and dance the song with her, and the crowd with the lights on. They've got a camera pointed at the crowd showing that in the background. Really fun moment. Everybody's phones on with the lights, holding them up, waving their hands with them. And then she took a shot with an audience member, a fan that requested a specific song. Fun moment. And then just a good expression here. And then some little glow off of this. I'm not sure what these little flares are coming from. That's neat. So you can see the 300, some of these shots, they're not super tack sharp, and that's fine. This is still an in-focus image, and that's something I focus on a lot with when I shoot a lot of pop stuff, especially female artists. There's a difference in having a shot that's perfectly in focus and a shot that's like tack sharp, to the point where a lot of times I will put on a de-sharpen mask to soften up the image, especially for skin tones. And these images are a great example of that, where like if this was on the 51.2, it would be razor sharp like this. That is an incredibly sharp image, and even in the raw it's even sharper without all the texture. But the texture and settings that I apply are generally aimed at making the image look not clinically sharp. And I put a lot of texture on my images, especially with my layer masks and everything, to get away from that, to add some character and to soften up the image. So I care about the images being in focus. I don't necessarily care about the sharpness of them. And I think that goes a long way to the character I'm trying to create in my images. Like this one is a very sharp, very in focus image, but it doesn't look overly sharpened or razor sharp, which to my eyes looks too digital, too fake. So that's about it for this one. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully some of these color correction tips in this one will help out if you're in similar situations. But yeah, the biggest thing for the show I was excited about was shooting on the 51.2, because I knew this would be a great show to focus on that and not have to just shoot on zooms. I really love shooting on primes in general, and the 51.2 is my favorite lens, and all of the shots I kept from that turned out great, and they're my favorites by far. all of these shots, I think, have that quality that I'm looking for. And it's harder in bands or groups that I shoot to use the 50. So shooting a soloist like Becky G was a perfect use for that. All right, that'll be it for this one. I might do a recap gallery for the Baby Metal show I just shot as well. It was at a different venue, so that'll be fun. And they have such a crazy stage setup and mix of elements to shoot for concerts, so that might be a fun one to do. All right, thanks for watching.